The woman beneath the snow was supposed to be his enemy, but when the Alpha King found her, he made a choice that would change 2 kingdoms forever. The storm over the northern mountains had buried everything beneath layers of ice and silence. For 3 days, the snow had covered the forgotten path between Frostfang Kingdom and the territory of its oldest rival. No traveler dared enter the frozen wilderness. No one expected to find a survivor there. Until King Nathaniel Blackthorn arrived. The Alpha King had spent his entire life protecting his kingdom from those beyond its borders. He had been taught that enemies carried hidden intentions, that mercy could become a weakness, and that a ruler's heart must always remain guarded. But when his eyes found the lone figure beneath the snow, something inside him stopped. It was not a warrior from the enemy kingdom. It was a young woman wearing a simple white cloak, her hand still holding a small bundle of healing herbs even after everything she had lost. Her name was Evelyn Grace Whitmore, the enemy's bride. The woman whose name had been spoken in every council meeting as a symbol of the kingdom they could never trust. Nathaniel expected to find someone who represented the hatred between 2 lands. Instead, he found someone who looked exhausted, frightened, and yet strangely peaceful. When Evelyn opened her eyes, she did not ask for power. She did not beg for revenge. She only whispered, "Please, do not let anyone else suffer because of me." Those words stayed with him. Nathaniel had heard countless promises from nobles, warriors, and leaders who wanted something from him. But this woman, lying alone in the freezing wilderness, was thinking about others before herself. It was the first thing that made him question everything he believed. The Alpha King ordered his people to bring her safely to Frostfang Castle. The decision shocked everyone who witnessed it. The royal guards exchanged uncertain looks. The council would demand answers. The kingdom would question why their ruler had chosen to protect someone connected to their enemy. But Nathaniel remained silent. He had made his choice. Inside the grand halls of Frostfang Castle, Evelyn slowly began to recover. She discovered a world completely different from the one she had known. The people around her feared her because of where she came from, not because of who she was. Yet she never responded with anger. She never blamed them. She simply thanked those who helped her and quietly offered kindness whenever she could. Nathaniel watched from a distance, searching for the hidden reason behind her actions. He wondered if her gentleness was an act. He wondered if there was a secret she was hiding. But every day brought another small moment that challenged his doubts. She comforted a frightened servant. She shared her limited belongings with someone who needed them more. She showed compassion without expecting anything in return. For the first time in many years, the Alpha King found himself questioning the stories he had always accepted as truth. The woman he was supposed to hate was not what the world had told him. And as the snow continued to fall outside Frostfang Castle, Nathaniel began to realize something he never expected. Sometimes the greatest threats are not the people standing against us. Sometimes they are the beliefs we refuse to question. The first thing Evelyn Grace Whitmore noticed about Frostfang Castle was the silence. It was not the peaceful silence of the snowy mountains she once knew. It was the silence of people watching, waiting, and wondering if she could be trusted. Every hallway carried whispers. Every passing glance reminded her that she was not seen as a guest, but as the enemy's bride. Yet Evelyn continued to walk with the same quiet dignity she had shown beneath the snow. She did not expect forgiveness. She did not expect acceptance. She only hoped that her presence would not create more problems for the people who had taken her in. King Nathaniel Blackthorn observed her carefully from the shadows of his throne room. The Alpha King had spent years studying the intentions of those who approached him. He knew how to recognize ambition, deception, and hidden desires. But Evelyn confused him. She had been given every reason to be bitter, yet she showed gratitude instead. She had lost her position, her home, and the future she once imagined, but she never used her pain as a reason to hurt others. During a meeting with the Royal Council, Nathaniel faced the questions he expected. "Why protect someone connected to our enemy?" one advisor asked. "How do we know she is not here to gather information?" Another voice questioned whether kindness toward an opponent could endanger the kingdom. Nathaniel listened without interruption. He understood their concerns. A king could not make decisions based only on emotion. But he also knew that judging someone without knowing their story was not justice. We will not condemn a person because of the family or kingdom she came from, Nathaniel finally said. We will judge her by her actions. Those words surprised the council. The Alpha King had always been known for his strict decisions, but this time his choice came from something different. Later that afternoon, Evelyn walked through the castle gardens with a small group of servants who were assigned to assist her. She noticed their nervousness and offered them a gentle smile. She did not ask for special treatment. She did not act like someone who believed she deserved a place beside royalty. Instead, she asked simple questions about their families and their lives. The servants slowly realized that the woman they feared was simply someone who cared. One young servant mentioned that her grandmother had been feeling weak for several weeks. Evelyn quietly offered advice about natural remedies she had learned while growing up. It was a small gesture, but moments like that began spreading through the castle. Nathaniel heard about these things from his advisors, and each story created another crack in the certainty he once had. He began wondering who had truly been his enemy all these years. That evening he found Evelyn standing near the castle window, looking out at the endless snow surrounding Frostfang. Do you miss your old life? He asked. Evelyn was quiet for a moment before answering. I miss the people who believed in me, but I do not miss the place that decided I was easier to abandon than to protect. Her words carried no anger, only sadness and acceptance. Nathaniel understood that kind of loneliness. He had spent years carrying the weight of a crown, while believing no one could truly understand him. For the first time he saw Evelyn not as a symbol of another kingdom, but as a person who had survived a painful journey. And somewhere between duty and doubt, the Alpha King began to realize that bringing her into Frostfang Castle might not have been a mistake. It might have been the beginning of something neither kingdom expected. The days passed slowly inside Frostfang Castle, but something unexpected began to change. The people who once watched Evelyn Grace Whitmore with suspicion started noticing the small moments that revealed who she truly was. She was not a spy. She was not a threat. She was simply a woman who had lost everything and still chose to care for others. For King Nathaniel Blackthorne, these discoveries created a feeling he could not easily explain. The Alpha King had spent years preparing for enemies, but he had never prepared for someone who challenged his beliefs without raising her voice. Evelyn never demanded to be understood. She simply showed the truth through her actions. One morning, Nathaniel found her in the castle's healing room. Instead of resting like a royal guest, she was organizing old medical supplies and speaking with the castle healers about better ways to help the people. The room was filled with quiet conversation and the gentle movement of those working together. Nathaniel stood at the doorway watching. You could have asked for anything, he said. Evelyn looked up with surprise. Anything. A larger room. More servants. A position in the royal court. She smiled softly. I did not come here to take something from your kingdom. Her answer stayed with him. Most people who entered a royal castle wanted influence. Evelyn wanted nothing except the chance to be useful. Later that day, Nathaniel reviewed reports from nearby villages. Several families had struggled during the harsh winter, and Evelyn immediately offered to help organize supplies and healing support. The council members were surprised. They expected the enemy's bride to think only about herself. Instead, she was thinking about strangers who had never shown her kindness. Slowly, the image they had created of her began to disappear. But outside the castle walls, not everyone accepted this change. In the neighboring kingdom, rumors spread about Evelyn's survival. Some believed she had found protection in Frostfang. Others believed she had abandoned her original home. The truth was more painful. Evelyn had never been given a choice. She had been treated as a symbol of alliance until that alliance became inconvenient. Nathaniel learned more about her past when he discovered old records from the failed peace agreement between the two kingdoms. He expected to find evidence of betrayal. Instead, he found a story of someone who had spent years trying to prevent conflict. Evelyn had been promised a future she never asked for, carrying responsibilities placed upon her by others. She had been called valuable when she served a purpose and forgotten when she no longer did. For the first time, Nathaniel felt something he rarely allowed himself to feel. Regret. Not because of something he had done, but because he realized how easily he had believed a story without knowing the person behind it. That evening, Nathaniel met Evelyn near the frozen courtyard. The moonlight reflected across the snow, creating the same quiet atmosphere where he had first found her. "I owe you an apology," he said. Evelyn looked at him calmly. "For what?" "For seeing the title before seeing the person." Those words surprised her. The Alpha King had never been someone who admitted uncertainty. Yet there he stood, not as a ruler demanding respect, but as a man acknowledging the truth. Evelyn lowered her eyes, feeling a warmth she had not felt in a long time. She had entered Frostfang believing she was only a burden someone had decided to carry. But now she began to wonder if this kingdom, and this king, might become something she never expected. And Nathaniel began to understand that the greatest mystery was not why his enemy's bride had survived the snow. It was why saving her had started to change him. The arrival of spring brought a strange feeling to Frostfang Castle. The snow still covered the highest mountains, but inside the ancient walls, something new was beginning to grow. It was not only the changing season, it was the change in the way people looked at Evelyn Grace Whitmore. The woman who had once entered the castle as a symbol of an enemy kingdom was slowly becoming someone they respected. She never tried to force acceptance. She never asked anyone to forget the past. Instead, she continued proving who she was through every quiet choice she made. King Nathaniel Blackthorne noticed this more than anyone. The Alpha King had ruled Frostfang with careful control for many years. Every decision was measured. Every alliance was considered. But Evelyn had shown him something he had forgotten. Trust could not be demanded. It had to be earned. One afternoon, Nathaniel invited Evelyn to visit the villages surrounding Frostfang. He wanted her to see the people she had helped without even realizing it. As they traveled through the countryside, Evelyn watched families rebuild after the difficult winter. She saw children laughing near warm homes and villagers sharing supplies with one another. Many people greeted her with kindness, something she never expected when she first arrived. "They know what you have done for them," Nathaniel said. Evelyn looked surprised. "I only helped where I could." Nathaniel turned toward her. "That is exactly why it mattered." His words made her quiet. Evelyn had spent most of her life believing her value depended on what she could provide. She had been praised when she was useful and forgotten when she was not. But in Frostfang, people appreciated her not because of her title, but because of her heart. However, the peaceful days did not erase every doubt. Some members of the royal court still believed Evelyn represented a danger. They remembered the years of conflict between the two kingdoms. They believed old wounds could not be healed by one person's kindness. During a council gathering, questions about Evelyn's place in Frostfang returned. The advisors spoke carefully, but Nathaniel could sense their hesitation. They wondered if protecting Evelyn was a mistake. They wondered if the Alpha King was allowing personal feelings to influence his judgment. Nathaniel listened patiently. Then he asked a simple question. "If we judge someone only by where they were born, how are we any different from the people who created this conflict?" The room became silent. His words carried the weight of a king who was beginning to see beyond old traditions. Later that evening, Evelyn found Nathaniel in the palace library. He was reading historical records about the conflict between their kingdoms. She noticed the concern in his expression. "You are trying to understand what happened," she said. Nathaniel looked up. "I am trying to understand what we were never told." Evelyn stepped closer and looked at the old documents. She realized the Alpha King was not searching for a reason to defend her. He was searching for the truth. For generations, both kingdoms had carried stories about enemies, but neither side had taken the time to understand the people behind those stories. Nathaniel closed the book and looked at her. Perhaps the greatest mistake was believing we already knew who the enemy was. Evelyn felt those words deeply. She had spent so long being defined by someone else's choices. Now, for the first time, someone powerful was willing to see her as she truly was. And as the distance between the Omega Healer and the Alpha King continued to disappear, both of them began to realize that their unexpected connection was not only changing their lives. It was beginning to change the future of two kingdoms. The quiet transformation within Frostfang Kingdom continued, but beyond the peaceful moments inside the castle, a deeper truth was waiting to be uncovered. King Nathaniel Blackthorne had spent many nights studying the history of both kingdoms, searching through records that had been ignored for generations. He was no longer looking for reasons to distrust Evelyn Grace Whitmore. He was searching for the truth behind the conflict that had shaped their world. One evening, while reviewing ancient documents inside the Royal Archive, Nathaniel discovered something unusual. Several important records from the past were incomplete. Pages describing the original alliance between the two kingdoms had disappeared, leaving only fragments behind. The missing information created more questions than answers. When Evelyn joined him in the archive, she immediately recognized some of the symbols written on the old documents. They were connected to her family's history. "My family always protected these records," she explained quietly. "But I was never told why they mattered." Nathaniel looked at her with curiosity. For the first time, he realized Evelyn's story was connected to something much larger than the conflict between two kingdoms. The Omega healer he once thought was simply a forgotten bride was carrying a forgotten piece of history. As they continued searching through the archive, they discovered references to an ancient tradition that spoke about unity between different bloodlines. The records described a time when the kingdoms were not divided by fear and suspicion. They worked together because they believed strength came from cooperation. Evelyn was surprised by what they found. She had spent years believing her existence was only important because of a political arrangement she never chose. But now she was discovering that her family's legacy represented something far more meaningful. Nathaniel noticed the emotion in her expression. "You were never just a symbol," he said. "You were carrying something people forgot how to value." Evelyn looked at the ancient pages and felt something she had not felt in years, a sense of belonging. However, the discovery also brought new uncertainty. Some members of the royal court feared that revealing the truth could change everything they understood about their history. They worried that old alliances and traditions would be questioned. The same people who once doubted Evelyn now had another reason to be cautious. But Nathaniel had changed. The ruler who once believed every decision needed to protect the past was now willing to protect the future. He refused to hide information simply because it challenged old beliefs. Meanwhile, Evelyn continued helping the people of Frostfang. She never used her connection to the royal family for personal advantage. She remained the same person Nathaniel had discovered. Beneath the snow, kind, patient, strong in ways that could not be measured by status or power. One morning, Nathaniel watched her speaking with villagers outside the castle. He realized something important. The ancient records were not the only thing that had been forgotten. The kingdom had forgotten that compassion could unite people more than fear ever could. Evelyn had arrived in Frostfang as someone everyone expected to distrust. But day by day, she was becoming someone they could not ignore. And Nathaniel understood that protecting her was no longer only about saving a woman from the enemy kingdom. It was about protecting the truth that could finally bring two worlds together. Yet as the hidden history began to emerge, another question remained unanswered. Why had Evelyn's family been connected to this forgotten legacy? And why had destiny brought her to Frostfang at the exact moment when the kingdom needed her most? The discovery inside the royal archive changed the way King Nathaniel Blackthorn viewed everything around him. The history he had trusted for years was incomplete, and the truth hidden beneath those missing pages revealed a reality neither kingdom had been prepared to face. For generations, Frostfang and its rival kingdom had believed their separation was necessary. They had passed down stories of distrust, warnings about enemies, and reasons to keep their worlds apart. But now Nathaniel understood that much of their hatred had been built on a misunderstanding that no one had dared to question. Evelyn Grace Whitmore felt the weight of the discovery as well. She had spent most of her life believing she was only a piece placed on a political board. She had been called important when others needed her, then abandoned when she became inconvenient. But the ancient records revealed something different. Her family had not been remembered because of power or wealth. They had been remembered because they protected a promise of peace between divided lands. Nathaniel noticed the uncertainty in her eyes as she studied the old documents. "You spent your entire life carrying a burden that was never yours to carry," he said. Evelyn looked at him quietly. "And what if people do not believe the truth?" Nathaniel understood the question. He had ruled long enough to know that facts alone could not always change hearts. Some people held on to old beliefs because those beliefs gave them comfort. But a true leader could not choose the easiest path. He had to choose the right one. The Alpha King decided that the hidden history could no longer remain buried. He called for a gathering of the royal council and presented the discoveries. The room filled with uncertainty. Some advisors questioned whether revealing the past would create more confusion. Others feared that changing traditions would weaken the kingdom. Nathaniel listened to every concern, but this time he did not allow fear to decide his actions. A kingdom cannot build its future on a story that was never complete, he said. His words carried a different kind of strength. Not the strength of authority, but the strength of someone willing to accept the truth. Evelyn watched him carefully. She saw the man behind the crown, the ruler who had once believed protecting his people meant holding on to everything familiar. Now he was willing to change because he understood that protecting a kingdom also meant allowing it to grow. As the days passed, more people learned about Evelyn's true connection to the Forgotten Alliance. Some were still uncertain, but many began seeing her differently. They no longer viewed her as a reminder of old conflicts. They saw a woman who had entered their kingdom with nothing and still offered kindness. One evening, Nathaniel and Evelyn stood on the balcony overlooking Frostfang. The snow-covered mountains stretched endlessly beneath the moonlight. "You know," Evelyn said softly, "when you found me, I thought my story had already ended." Nathaniel looked at her. "And now?" She looked toward the kingdom below. "Now I think maybe it was only beginning." Those words stayed with him. Nathaniel had once believed his duty was to defeat anything that threatened his kingdom. But Evelyn had taught him that sometimes the greatest victories came from understanding, not conquering. Their connection was no longer based on a single act of mercy in the snow. It was built on trust, respect, and the courage to challenge everything they had been taught. Yet even as the truth began spreading across Frostfang, another challenge was approaching. The old powers who benefited from division would not easily accept a future built on unity. And soon, Nathaniel and Evelyn would face the most important choice of their lives. Whether to protect the past everyone knew, or fight for the future no one had imagined. The truth hidden for generations had finally begun to reach the people of Frostfang Kingdom, but with every truth came a new challenge. Change was never easy, especially for those who had built their lives around old beliefs. King Nathaniel Blackthorn understood this better than anyone. He knew that revealing the forgotten history was only the beginning. A kingdom could change its laws in a single day, but changing the hearts of its people required patience, trust, and proof. Evelyn Grace Whitmore felt that responsibility deeply. She never wanted to become a symbol or a figure that people used to represent a new era. She only wanted to help others the way she always had. Yet now her presence carried a meaning far beyond herself. The Omega healer who was once abandoned in the snow had become the person many people looked to when they imagined a different future. One morning, Nathaniel invited Evelyn to join him during a visit to the villages near the border. He wanted the people to see that the future of Frostfang was not built only inside palace walls. As they traveled through the countryside, Evelyn noticed something that touched her heart. Families from different backgrounds were beginning to work together. Old fears were slowly being replaced by curiosity and understanding. Children who once heard stories about enemies now listened to stories about cooperation. Nathaniel watched Evelyn as she spoke with villagers. She never tried to impress anyone. She never reminded them of her connection to the royal family. She simply listened to their concerns and offered support where she could. "You realize they trust you because you never asked them to trust you," Nathaniel said. Evelyn smiled gently. "People can feel when someone truly cares." Her answer stayed with him. The Alpha King had spent years believing respect came from strength and authority. Evelyn showed him that respect could also come from compassion. However, the growing acceptance of Evelyn created discomfort among those who wanted the old divisions to remain. Some members of the nobility believed the traditions of the past were being forgotten. They questioned whether an Omega from an enemy kingdom should have such influence within Frostfang. Nathaniel expected resistance, but this time he did not face it alone. Evelyn stood beside him, not as someone needing protection, but as someone who had earned her place through her actions. During a royal gathering, one advisor questioned whether the kingdom was moving too quickly. He asked if the people were ready to accept a future that challenged everything they had been taught. Nathaniel looked across the hall before answering. "A kingdom that refuses to grow will eventually lose the ability to protect what matters most." His words created silence. The council members understood that the Alpha King was no longer making decisions based only on tradition. He was thinking about the generations that would come after him. Later that evening, Evelyn found Nathaniel standing alone near the castle gardens. The winter snow was beginning to disappear, revealing the first signs of spring beneath the frozen ground. "You are carrying the weight of everyone's expectations again," she said softly. Nathaniel looked at her with surprise. Few people could recognize his struggles without him saying a word. "A king is supposed to have answers," he replied. Evelyn shook her head gently. "A good king knows when to search for them." For a moment Nathaniel said nothing. Her words reminded him of how much she had changed his understanding of leadership. The woman he had once saved because of a moment of mercy had become the person who helped him become a better ruler. And as spring arrived in Frostfang, both of them realized that their greatest challenge was no longer discovering the truth. It was protecting the new future they had begun creating together. The arrival of spring brought a new atmosphere to Frostfang Kingdom. The snow that once covered the mountains began to disappear, revealing the beauty hidden beneath the cold season. But the greatest change was not happening in the land. It was happening in the hearts of the people. For the first time in many years, the kingdom was beginning to imagine a future without fear controlling every decision. At the center of that change were Evelyn Grace Whitmore and King Nathaniel Blackthorne. The bond between them had started with an unexpected choice in the snow, but it had grown into something much deeper. Nathaniel no longer saw Evelyn as a responsibility or a reminder of an old conflict. He saw her as the person who had helped him discover a different way to lead. Evelyn, who once believed she had lost everything, began to understand that she had found a place where she was valued for who she was, not for what others expected her to represent. One evening, Nathaniel invited Evelyn to the highest balcony of Frostfang Castle. From there, they could see the villages below glowing beneath the evening sky. The sight reminded them of how much had changed in such a short time. "When I found you in the snow, I thought I was saving someone who needed protection," Nathaniel said quietly. Evelyn looked at him with a gentle smile. "And now?" He looked toward the kingdom. "Now I know you were the one who helped save us." Evelyn lowered her gaze, feeling the weight of those words. She had never believed her kindness could influence an entire kingdom. She had only followed the values her family had taught her. Help those who need help. Listen before judging. Choose compassion even when it is difficult. Those simple beliefs had become the foundation of a new future. However, not everyone was ready to accept the changes. Some members of the old royal families continued to hold on to the traditions that had separated the kingdoms for generations. They believed peace built on understanding was too fragile. They believed the past should remain untouched. Nathaniel knew these concerns would not disappear overnight. A true transformation required more than one announcement from a king. It required time and trust. Instead of forcing change, he continued showing his people why this new path mattered. He allowed different voices to be heard. He encouraged cooperation between communities that had once lived apart. And beside him, Evelyn continued proving that compassion was not a weakness. It was a strength that could unite people who thought they had nothing in common. One morning, Nathaniel found Evelyn in the castle garden caring for the first flowers of the season. He watched her carefully placing each plant into the soil, giving attention to even the smallest details. "You treat everything like it has a chance to grow," he said. Evelyn smiled. "Because everything deserves that chance." Her answer reminded him of the kingdom itself. Frostfang had been frozen by old fears for generations, but now it was beginning to heal. Nathaniel realized that Evelyn had never entered his life to become part of his kingdom. She had entered his life to help him see what his kingdom could become. Their connection was no longer defined by the circumstances that brought them together. It was defined by trust, respect, and the choices they continued making every day. But as the two kingdoms moved closer toward peace, one final decision remained. The world would soon learn whether their new beginning was strong enough to overcome the shadows of the past. And Nathaniel knew that when the moment came, he would not face it as the same king who found a stranger beneath the snow. He would face it as the leader Evelyn had helped him become. The day that would define the future of two kingdoms arrived beneath a clear spring sky. For generations, Frostfang and its rival kingdom had carried the weight of old misunderstandings, But now the people stood before a different possibility. The royal hall that once represented division became the place where a new promise would begin. King Nathaniel Blackthorn stood before the council and the people of Frostfang, knowing that his next words would shape the future of everyone who called the kingdom home. Beside him stood Evelyn Grace Whitmore. The woman who had once been abandoned beneath the snow was no longer seen as an enemy's bride. She was seen as someone who had brought hope to a kingdom that had forgotten how to trust. Nathaniel looked across the hall and remembered the man he had been before he found her. He had believed being a strong ruler meant carrying every burden alone. He had believed protecting his people required keeping his heart closed. But Evelyn had shown him that a king could be powerful without losing compassion. A leader could protect traditions while still creating something better. For too long we allowed fear to decide who belonged and who did not, Nathaniel said. Today we choose a different path. The hall remained silent as everyone listened. He spoke about the truth hidden in history, about the mistakes created by generations of misunderstanding, and about the importance of building a future based on respect rather than suspicion. Evelyn watched the people listening and felt emotions she could barely describe. She had once believed her story would end in that frozen wilderness. She thought she had become someone the world had forgotten. But now she stood beside a king who had chosen to see her as a person, not a title. After the gathering, the kingdom slowly began embracing the changes. Villages that once remained separated began sharing knowledge and resources. Families who had inherited old fears started hearing new stories. The name Evelyn Grace Whitmore no longer represented conflict. It represented the possibility that even the deepest divisions could heal. Nathaniel and Evelyn continued their work together, not because destiny demanded it, but because they chose it. Their connection was built on the small moments that mattered most. The conversations where they listened to each other. The decisions where they considered others before themselves. The quiet understanding between two people who had both known loneliness and finally found someone who truly understood them. One evening, they returned to the snowy mountains where their story had first changed. The landscape looked different now. The same place that once represented uncertainty had become a reminder of a new beginning. Nathaniel looked across the peaceful valley and smiled. "I thought I found someone who needed saving," he said. Evelyn looked at him warmly. "And what did you find?" He answered honestly. "Someone who taught me what it means to save a kingdom." Evelyn looked toward the horizon, watching the final light of the day disappear behind the mountains. She knew their journey had not been about a king rescuing a forgotten woman. It had been about two people discovering that compassion could be stronger than hatred, and understanding could be more powerful than fear. The story of Frostfang would be remembered for generations. Not because an Alpha King defeated his enemies, but because he chose kindness when the world expected him to choose anger. Not because an Omega healer changed a kingdom through power, but because she changed it through the courage to remain kind. And from that day forward, the people of Frostfang remembered one truth above all others. Sometimes the person everyone overlooks is the person who brings the greatest change.